Let's talk about problems. I used to have more problems than I could count. The biggest one being a drug problem. I was addicted to meth, fentanyl, alcohol at certain times. I had a ton of different addictions. These addictions brought me to my knees. I ended up in rehabs, jails more than once in different states, institutions from the age of 14, 15 until I was 25, 26. Right? It's only been the past couple of years that I've taken what I'm about to share in this video and completely reshaped my life. Because most of the time, it's not the problem that is actually the problem. It's the resistance you have to the situation that creates the problem, that creates the pain, right? So the way I look at it is the meaning you give to anything in your life is the effect you will get, right? So when I was going through all of the addiction, when I was in jail, when I had to go to rehab, I was mandated by the state to go to rehab, to go through a halfway house and spend 6 months of my life there. I could look at that as a huge problem. And most of my peers, most of the people around me did. They looked at it as rock bottom, the worst period of their life. Like they had to restart from zero. And that was true, right? Maybe not the rock bottom and the worst period part, but we were all restarting from zero, basically negative. We had fines, legal trouble, we had a ton of problems. But what I did when I came to realize was that this was an opportunity for me to get everything I ever wanted, right? It was just a matter of time for me to take this opportunity, use it, and get everything I ever wanted. It was an opportunity to experience something new, right? So let's say you're going through a financial problem. You might not have enough money for rent, your car payment, or you just want more. You want to take a vacation, you want this, you want that. That could be a huge problem. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to take the reality away from what we deem as problems, right? Because it's tough. Life is not always forgiving. Life is not always life. It can feel like life is against you a lot. I get it, but it's so important to ground yourself in understanding that maybe this problem, the thing I deemed as a problem, is actually meant to be happening. Maybe it's an opportunity for me to access my potential. Maybe it's an opportunity for me to get to where I want to go, to take steps towards my potential, my desires, my dreams. Maybe it's an opportunity to learn, right? Um, Addiction is life or death. It really is. It's a epidemic worldwide. You see states and cities that have been overrun by addiction. It is life or death. Frankly, life or death. People are dying every single day. So I don't want people to think I have it all figured out. But I can say that addiction was the biggest opportunity I ever had. It was the biggest opportunity for me to change my life, right? Because when we're born and when we're growing up, we don't have very much control over our environment, our caretakers, what's being brought to us, what's programming the person that we're going to become. But as we grow older, we have that opportunity. We have that power. We have the capability to change from the inside out. When you're born and as you grow up, you're kind of molded from the outside in. But as you grow and as you expand and as you become an adult, you start to gain the ability to grow, to change, to mold yourself from the outside, from the inside out. And this is how we change our life. And the biggest thing that you have to realize is maybe you don't have problems. Maybe the things you say you want, the dreams you say you want, the car, the financial goals you say you want, maybe they're on the path. Maybe they're already in front of you. You just have to find a way to take steps towards them. But when you label everything as a problem, it's not so easy to take steps because it's not the problem that's causing the pain or causing the suffering. It's your resistance to dealing with the problem, to dealing with the situation that's causing the pain and suffering. So, how do we actually do this in real time? How do we shift the meaning we're giving to a situation or circumstance so that it no longer it looks like a problem in our life? So maybe it looks a little bit more like something we can overcome, something we can use. Maybe it looks a little bit more like an opportunity. And I'd say the first step in that is to be honest with yourself. It doesn't matter about anybody else, wholly with yourself. This is a one-player game we call life. Be honest with yourself. Is this really a problem or does it just make me uncomfortable? Is this really a problem, or is there a story and narrative around this situation that I have deemed a problem? Am I dealing with facts or feelings, right? Because feelings is something we could change. The facts, maybe not so much. And at the end of the day, it comes down to where you're putting your attention. Are you putting your attention on the problem, the bad part of this, or are you putting your attention on the potential outcome that could really add benefit to your life, add knowledge, add growth, add information, add a new skill, so many different opportunities. For me, I had nothing but opportunity when it came down to actually dealing with my addiction, actually dealing with my legal troubles, actually growing up a bit and dealing with finances and working a job, right? I had to grow, and that was nothing but an opportunity. But if I looked at it as all a problem, it would have been too big of a mountain for me to actually climb. And I did that for most of my life. Anything that I had resistance towards was a problem, and I just continued to build resistance until I inevitably avoided it, or I looked for some outside substance to make it a little bit easier to deal with. And I know everybody's not dealing with addiction, but shit, our phones, our inability to deal with life on life's terms, that's an addiction. But when you can train your attention, when you can train your mind to create meaning in a way that paints you as a hero, paints you as someone who's courageous, as a warrior, as someone who's growing, who's taking life and making the best of it. That's how you create change. That's how you give different meaning to your situation and your circumstance. If you're moving through an uncomfortable situation, just keep moving. You know, you just have to find a way to lessen the resistance, because you will make it through. If you look at anything you've gone through in the past, you made it through. You're here, you're watching this video. And once I was able to lessen that resistance and look at the problem as an opportunity, my life changed. Things became easier. I was more willing to confront life head on. I started to use my emotions on purpose, right? I started to look at the uncomfortable feelings and emotions that I had, and I started to point them out. Why do I feel so uncomfortable? What is the story I'm telling myself about this situation? Because the situation is not inevitably a problem, and it's not innately a problem. It doesn't need to be. It can be an opportunity. A couple of years after I had gotten arrested and I went through the halfway house and I was still dealing with legal troubles, but I was very much so on the other side of it, I got pulled over. I got to look at that cop and say, look, I'm doing better. He's like, do you remember me? And I was like, yeah, how could I not remember you? I got to look at him in the eye and say, that day changed my life. And I don't know how you feel about police. I, have mixed feelings about them most of the time. But I got to thank him because he played a role in changing my life. I know that I had to take the steps. I had to shift my perspective. I had to look at that day and everything leading up to it and after it as opportunities, as part of the path towards my dreams, towards my desires, towards becoming a more fuller person, a more whole version of myself. I had to do that, but he played a role, and I got to thank him for that. But if I held on to that resentment, and if I looked at that day as a bad day still, I'd still be holding on to that. It'd still be a problem, and I wouldn't have the resilience that I do today. I wouldn't have the gratitude that I do today that fuels me getting up in the morning, that fuels me making these videos and sharing my experience. I'm not a guru, but I have had to shift my perspective from miserable, anxious, addicted person, depressed person, to happy, healthy, resilient, courageous, and that's not easy. Most people go through their life living the exact same way as they did when they were 20. They don't change. They don't grow. They don't shift the perspective. They don't look at things in a new way. I don't have all the answers, but I promise you that if you can start to look at your problems as opportunities, or if you can just give a different meaning to the situations that you're going through, your life will change. You'll start to become more resilient. You'll start to take opportunities head on. And I'll tell you one thing, opportunity begets opportunity. Life begets life. Opportunities create more opportunities. And even the things that we may not look at initially as opportunities, if you can look at them as opportunities, they will create more opportunities. You'll start to grow. If you're dealing with anything in your life that has become a pattern that you've dealt with before, that maybe you have shitty relationship after shitty relationship, is it really a problem or is it a mirror? Is it showing you the perspective that you have? Is it showing you the person that you view yourself as? Is it showing you the lens that you're looking through? When you can do that, when you can be honest with yourself and sit down and be honest with yourself, shit will change. The present moment is always creating the next one. So when you shift your perspective in the moment, in a situation that makes you uncomfortable, if you notice that uncomfortability and you shift your perspective, that moment where you shifted your perspective will create the next one and create the next one and create the next one. But when you stay in that negative frame of mind, when you stay in that negative perspective, that moment of negativity, of resistance will create the next one and will create the next one and so on and so forth, inevitably. And you can go your whole life like this. And just as this moment is creating the next one, all of the moments that led up to this have created this moment. And this life, us being humans, we have this really cool ability to go back, to close our eyes and look at our memories and see what stories we've told, right? It took a little while. And in that moment, when I got arrested on that day that, changed my whole life, I was pissed. I was not happy. I was not going to thank that cop. I was going to do anything but thank that cop. I was fucked back then, right? But now that I've gotten a little space between me and then, and I've evolved and I've grown a little bit, I'm able to notice and recognize that was a good day. That ended years and years of suffering. And it may have taken some time, but that moment created the next. And I can sit in this moment and be grateful for that moment instead of holding on to that day and harboring resentment or anger or rejecting a part of myself that did those things and feeling shame and guilt, right? When I change the meaning, even back then, even when I look back, when I change the meaning on something I've been through, I get a sense of courage. I get a sense of how strong I am, how capable I am. I see that I was being prepared for what I actually want. Something else that I've come to realize on this path is that if it hurt me, if a situation, a person, a circumstance hurt me emotionally, it was because it needed to. I needed that. I needed to see my weak points. I needed to see what was still triggering me so that I could shift that perspective, so that I could see where I was painting myself out to be a victim, so I could see that where I wasn't using my full potential, so that I could see just how powerful I really am. We see people all around us that are just miserable. Maybe they're not miserable, but they're not happy. They're not aligned. People wake up when they're 50 and they realize their life isn't really theirs. They live a mediocre life that they didn't really want because it's what we're taught to do. We're not taught to change our perspective. We're taught this is right and this is wrong. But right and wrong are up to you. The meaning is up to you. The effect is up to you. When you live as cause, when you become the cause of the meaning that you give to a situation that you may have deemed as a problem, you get a different effect. Life is as good as it's ever been. 100 years ago, we did not have the opportunity that we have today. We didn't. We really didn't. We can look back at past generations and say they had it much easier, and in some respects they did. But they didn't have the information, the knowledge, the open-mindedness that we have today. Use it. Open your mind a little bit. Nothing, it can't hurt you. We all want more. We all have dreams. And I'm telling you, your dream is not just something that you carry around for your life. It is a divine gift. It is a gift. It is a path towards becoming the wholest version of yourself, towards becoming the highest version of yourself, the most aligned, the most happy, the most free version of yourself. And maybe you're already on that path, but the resistance you have towards what's in front of you is blocking your blessings. It's blocking all that you say you want. This version of you already exists. Figure out what meaning you're giving to life. And I promise you, the effect you get will change. This is the mantra. The meaning you give is the effect you get. The meaning you give is the effect you get. I love you guys. If you're interested in talking with me, there's a link down below. Join my Discord. Let's communicate. That's all I got. Dream on purpose.